get it to? All right, never mind.
Sometimes just restarting resets the network cache. There's routing tables and stuff. It seems silly, but
it's just turning it off and on again.
Exactly.
Interesting.
When IT people say that, it really is actually a good strategy.
Yeah.
I actually realized maybe it's my web protection stuff. Okay, so I think we are live. I'm gonna not worry about it opening up. I'm gonna try closing it. My browser, disabling this badly behaving security extension. And see what happens there. After I do that, it might help. So we haven't had a meeting for a little while. I was out of town. I looks like you all had a meeting last week. So
we have been, correct. We have been having meetings. But just neither Michelle or I have had any specific assembly line related matters. We've been doing more Kiln PR reviews and keep progress there.
Okay. So yeah, I guess probably not a lot that I need to be directly updated on with that. Let's see. Let me pull up the agenda here. See if things go a little faster. All right, so I don't think we had anything probably on here, right? Load time, combo box accessibility. Okay, those are good.
I added some stuff here.
You just added those, yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything on my side that would be worth us kind of highlighting. One thing I was thinking of would be the Weaver rearrangement stuff that we had on Trello. And I don't think it means going through it screen by screen, although maybe if we don't have anything else, maybe we'll have time to do a little bit of that today. Anything else anyone can think of that we should use?
We have items from the past, but I don't know that I'm particularly ready to discuss them in anything other than the most general of terms.
Yeah, since we don't have a lot of really specific things other than these first two, if there's any planning kind of stuff that we wanted to talk about, we're thinking about future conversations. This could be a good time to start those discussions, maybe. And it's also worth saying that classes start on August 29th. So I will probably not be able to do that Monday, and that's a couple weeks away.
Well, there's...
But I think I'll be able to focus. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't know if there's broader things, but there's on a lower item, there's multi-signature flow and phone input default.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm not sure how much bandwidth I have for that at the moment. I'm just saying there might be items lower down that we could use.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking since we didn't have anything that anyone had as a really urgent thing, we could always go back to a week of having really specific things when people had them teed up. But we don't often have a big gap in our agenda to talk about planning stuff. So that's why I thought that's the kind of thing we might add. But yeah, let's just jump right into, if no one has anything else specific for now, why don't we jump into combo box accessibility first? Because I bet we can be more productive on that one.
Okay, fair.
Bryce, you just want to kind of give a little overview? Maybe I'll give you some of it written in.
Yeah, that would work. I could also just give you the link too. It's all in a big issue.
We could review issues if that is a useful thing, a broader goal in the various repositories.
That's fair.
I don't know if Quentin was hearing that, but okay.
Yeah. I have some thoughts, at least what we could do planning stuff in a bit. But for the combo box accessibility stuff, I actually could just spin up a whole thing, but I don't think it's super worth it. Essentially, it got flagged by the auto accessibility checker because this little button doesn't have a label, and so it will just be screen read as button or push button or something. And so that's like a minor thing that could be fixed relatively easy. But the bigger thing is that nothing else about combo boxes are really accessible. There was this whole weird thing where the keyboard controls weren't actually working, but it seemed to only be Ubuntu and not like it wasn't. I couldn't do the same thing on Firefox on Windows, so I'm assuming it's just a weird Linux thing that doesn't really affect anyone. But more importantly, there are it doesn't actually screen read anything. Like whenever you click on the drop down and it shows all of the possible options, none of them are screen read. Even when you're keyboard navigating through each one individually. And then if you enter it wrong or type a wrong number, those value or those errors aren't screen read either. It's just this field is required. And that one might be I don't remember running into that with other validation types on neck fields. And so I don't know if that's a general DocAssemble thing or if that's just this field.
It might be a bootstrap thing. I think this is is this not a bootstrap element?
So that's the next part, is that it's a separate bootstrap plugin that someone just made, or not just made. They made it a while back. They have one commit in 2021, but it was just fixing a README, and so the last actual practical commit was in 2019. And there are several PRs sitting, 17.
Wow.
Not to call out that open source person. That's just sort of how open source works.
Yep.
And so the two questions are, one, it feels like it's going to take a while. At least it would take a while for me to try and fix these things because I am not a front end engineer. I know enough to find these things are wrong, but I don't know enough to actually figure out the JavaScript and specifically the browser behaviors that would fix these things. And so and also the fact it's in a separate Bootstrap plugin makes it a bit more difficult to patch and actually get DocAssemble to use the patch version. So the first question is, do we think that we have or do we think that we would want to try to eventually fix this? Yes or no? And then separate from that question is, even if we do decide to fix it, it will take a while, since I don't think any of us have just tons of free time lying around to only do this for 2 or 3 days. And so if we do, which I don't remember if that was a question I had made. Oh no, it was here. I think that we should recommend that we avoid using them in interviews, and I don't know if it's bad enough to let's go back and change some other interviews to not use combo boxes and just use drop downs or just use a text input with validation. And if we do, do we have specific things we should suggest? It feels like it's kind of very context dependent. For this example, this was one that I think Matt had written that was a drop down with year of birth, and it had all of the different years you could select from 1920 to now, or just 100 years back or something. But it also let you type it. And instead of forcing it to be a drop down with 100 options, I just let the user type the year and then kept the same validation. So you can't type a year or you can't type something that's not a year, or something like a year that's incredibly old or something like that. Yeah. So those are the two questions of, do we want to attempt to patch it, or at least do we think we can and sort of want to put it on a priority list somewhere, and separate from that, do we want to try to patch older interviews to not use combo boxes out? I think it's, at least for me, it's pretty clear. If I see new interviews that people are writing that are using them, I might suggest not using them. But like, do we think that these are bad enough things that we should prevent, or we should like change the question library to not use a combo box?
Does the question library use any combo boxes now?
That's a good question.
I guess I could do a grab.
Yeah, so that's probably actually the first thing, because I don't know if the question library does. I'm sure there are some in our interviews that do, but I don't know which of them do.
I thought the court thing was using a combo box.
Okay, so there's there's only 2 references in managed sessions.
Mm-hmm.
What is managed sessions? Is that actually
Well,
interview?
also,
Not sure it is.
I wouldn't trust GitHub's search functionality. I know
I'm not using GitHub search function.
I see. Got it.
Yeah, I'm assuming Quentin's using that for search, but
Just using grep.
well, actually, the good thing about GitHub's search functionality is we can see
Anyone else is
all of the places. Yeah, we can see all of the places we're using it in our interviews, which are managed session in some classes.
The other input that uses something very similar in appearance is the Ajax or Ajax. Sorry, Ajax. It's the same spelling. A Dutch Amsterdam football club. Okay, yeah, the managed sessions. That's a false positive, because that's not a real interview that anyone can access.
I see. Okay.
It was something that I put in as a demo. I should remove that.
Okay.
So
So
it's not in the core anymore.
okay, it's not in core. It looks like it's definitely in other interviews. It's in Toolbox. No, it's an income interview.
It's a demo though.
Income demo. But at least it looks like it's fairly used in just random one-off questions. What did you receive in the last 12 months, etc.
Oh yeah, I do remember we've used it in a few places. People have to type a court, and it might be a Massachusetts court, but it might not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see, and that looks like that's been copied. We used that in the 209A, I believe.
Yes, yeah, that was one of the ones that it showed up. But yeah, it's like those.
Appeals court one.
Yeah, is this enough that we think we should try to just patch out people using it? It's essentially, I would argue, not usable for screen readers because, or at best, it's the exact same as a text input for screen readers because it does not read any of the options, and at worst, it's worse than a text input because it's all of the screen read information about it still says select, make a selection, or it's acting like you're supposed to use a drop down, but it's not, and so I'd say arguably it's worse than just using a text input for these things for screen readers, but yeah.
I'm just Googling and seeing if anyone has I just tried looking accessible combo box bootstrap and didn't come up with anything. Well, there was one result that said from 2014 about how to make them accessible.
Interesting, yeah. I think
Maybe
the
combo box are just kind of a little bit disfavored as an input style, although I do find them to be really helpful. Maybe if we just look for
there was
drop down, type ahead. That's the feature that's useful.
There was I'm trying to find it, not Combox.
Combox.
No, I'm not going to find it because there was a there was a W3 example of here's how you use one. Oh, this is just straight the code because I was looking at the code. Does this get us back? It does not find it. I'd have to find that somewhere else. But there was one. There was a few examples on W3 that were oh, this is how you should do it. But it was just different, completely different enough from how Bootstrap does anything. And I am realizing sometimes I don't feel like I know any front end stuff because I don't understand how Bootstrap works. But yeah, it looks like there are ways to do it better. And so I my gut instinct tells me it's patchable. It's just whether how much time we'd have to put into it to try and patch the a combination of how much time we'd have to put in to patch this Bootstrap plugin, and then on top of that, how much time we'd have to put in to try and get that patch merged. both to this upstream, and if not this upstream, convincing Jonathan or making our own fork and then convincing Jonathan to use this fork instead, and implicitly taking on the maintenance burden of it, which is
Yeah.
a lot.
That's what I was.
What is the plugin that we're using?
It
What the
is,
doc symbol's using, rather.
it is just called Bootstrap Combo Box.
Okay.
Daniel Farrell is the.
Yeah, I think I'm finding that one.
It's Daniel Farrell, the person merging these things.
All right, I'm not finding it on.
Yeah, I can actually. Sorry,
Oh,
I should.
Danielle.
I should have
Farrell. Okay, see, I
just added this. That's my bad.
Just to not lose track of kind of the
The-
broader question.
Yeah.
I think that at least for now, we should stop using, I mean, this was more than just Ubuntu, right? This was a problem on other platforms as well.
The accessibility
yes.
problems were there.
Yes, there were some extra like keyboard issues or like keyboard accessibility issues that I couldn't reproduce, and that was the only Ubuntu thing. But everything about the screen reader just not working is I can do that. Do it on Windows on the free screen reader that you can install there. So
it seems like right now a quick solution is to get rid of the combo box functionality, just because the patching is gonna, like, if we do it, it is gonna take a while.
I agree, and I do think
So I think that part is answered, right?
It's not necessarily a quick thing. It depends on what we're doing. So we don't need to do it in our core files. We know that. We know we need to do it for Illinois e-fileable interviews.
Yeah, and I have like a PR out, or not a PR. I have it in a branch out, which getting that branch merged will just be getting that branch merged with Matt. But the bigger question is how big of a refactor should we try to do? Should we just sit down, take it like a few hours and go through all of our repos and just stop using combo boxes? All of our repos and just stop using combo boxes. Do we take a longer, or do we try and do it over a few weeks or something, like between a few of these calls, and just make sure we have caught all of them?
I guess it could be replaced with 2 different inputs, or maybe 3, right? You would need to replace one combo box potentially with 3 separate inputs.
Yeah,
What's the third? Because
the drop down menu.
Yeah, drop down text.
There's the
it's not
blank
in
fill in
there.
field and a button that toggles. I want to type it in rather than use the drop down menu. So I feel like you don't want to have 2 inputs that do the same thing without some way for the user to indicate the mode switch. I could be wrong.
Oh, okay. That's just a way of thinking about it I haven't thought about. I've just been thinking the simple switch is to just change the data type to text or drop down, and just use either of force using one of those. I don't know.
Yeah, in some circumstances you could just use a drop down probably, and then let the browser's type ahead features work for drop downs, because they tend to, as long as we start at the beginning of the result.
Yeah, those aren't super usable because you can never know where you typed. But that's a separate thing, and it's
Right.
not like a screen reader unfriendly version of it.
Mhm.
But for places where it was really designed to let people choose from a list of pre-canned options and add their own, like that's the specific use case that's envisioned, then I think it really does require 3.
I
inputs
see.
to replace it.
Okay, I had imagined being able to do either of those, or do both at the same time. Okay.
But sometimes maybe it's enough to let people type it freeform. I think for the court list, that's an example of where we really wanted to give people more guidance than just freeform. But sometimes it would be a court out of state. That seems like pretty easily explained. Like, oh, it's in Massachusetts court, choose from this list, and then have a button that says it's out of state and let them type in the value. So that's easy enough there.
I see.
Probably
That's more of that's like an actual, even if it is like a minor, it's still a structural interview change. It's
Yep.
like there's no way we'd be able to do that entirely in JavaScript.
No, definitely it's not a JavaScript change. It
Okay.
requires changing the interview, and
Yeah.
You could, there's a way to double up the meaning of the input. But the problem is when you go to review that question, if it's the same input twice on the screen, it doesn't display that very well. So it doesn't just require changing that screen, it requires changing the template where it's used and adding the logic there to use the right selection, the one that comes from the drop-down menu or for the free text input.
Yeah.
So I don't see it as a quick change at all. I think it's going to be a lot of, we would need to have a lot of judgment to see like how that input is being used and the best way to replace it.
Okay. Okay.
So I think it's worth, because we don't know like why people used a combo box, I think it's worth figuring out if it's usable and like scoping out the accessible version of the combo box input. It's really weird that there's just this one plugin that hasn't been updated since 2016. It makes me wonder if like we should get rid of combo boxes. So like I would say like that should be on our list to investigate, but it's going to be a lot of work to replace them in every place they're used.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's one of those things. I guess most front end things don't super require a lot of like changes or anything like that. Because there's not like generally aren't huge security bugs and things like that. And so once that you can actually get it to a point where it's mostly feature complete for whatever the author wants. And I hadn't actually gone through and see a lot of these do seem like they're less fixes and more like here's another feature that maybe just the person didn't want to do.
Okay.
But it is worth
to look
it.
It'd be good to look at the issues that have been brought up to see if there are any like ones that are not overcomable.
You mean these issues?
Issues in pull request. Yeah, those issues in pull request.
I'm
to
not
see if
super
there
sure.
really is a fundamental problem.
There have been 4 since the most recent 4, 1 in 2019 and 3 in 2016, have no comments on them or anything.
No, I mean, they're still useful because they tell us, like for the phone number one, right? I looked up, I was like, well, maybe this is something I can approach in a different way. And then I looked up issues on libraries that had done phone number stuff. And it turned out there were a lot of issues that couldn't be solved in the ways that I was thinking, right? Like they made issues and they were actually unsolvable issues. It's not like there were comments or conversations, it just was made clear because of the issues that had been brought up that they weren't really as solvable as I thought. So if we look at the issues that have been brought up, we might be able to see if there are insurmountable issues that we'd be wasting our time working on trying to surmount.
So my first thought would be, let's try to find a different plugin that someone thought up from the ground up. Accessibility was one of their goals. Like, so if there were an official Bootstrap way to do this, that'd be great.
Yeah.
It might be that there's not an official Bootstrap combo box, but the problem we're trying to solve has a Bootstrap like golden path I don't know if that's the right way to say it. Should probably avoid using idioms anyway. But yeah, there might be like a better way to reach our goal that's supported with native Bootstrap elements that we should transition people to using. Or like a better, more usable way. Like maybe the multiple buttons is better if people don't know how to use combo boxes, and that's why no one has them built in, right? Like I'd want to do a little bit of work there to figure out what we should do. I doubt that we should just jump right to fixing and making the combo box input accessible without doing some work to figure out either another alternative plugin or a different approach altogether that's better supported.
Sure.
Okay. So action items of things we can actually do for this are find a better plugin,
research alternatives.
And by research alternatives, we just mean alternate like patterns that you can use that aren't combo boxes.
Yeah.
Okay.
we should probably set some deadline for when we want to like decide about updating existing interviews that aren't accessible.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, it's something to think about is like, well, is it okay for us to wait for that until we want to e-file those interviews?
Yeah, that was, I think, yeah, that is a good point, and then I think that was one of the things I had mentioned somewhere, and the issue of like one of our options could just be like at least just avoiding avoiding it for e-filing one, since that is the hard like thing that we are checking and making sure everything accessible for. It's not like the good thing, but it's just one of those things that, I don't know, there's only so much developer work that we can put into just doing all of these small patches and stuff. And so yeah, that's one option too, of just like knowing that we're going to try and revisit and make a lot of our interviews e-fileable, do full accessibility. We're already doing accessibility checks when we restart doing Kiln stuff. But just actually before we e-file, do an accessibility thing and make sure that, we already add this to the list of manual checks we need to make sure, and it'll already be caught by an auto check. And so and then we decide on what to do with it then. Sorry, that was a lot of talking for, I think, just reached.
Yeah. That's kind of where I would say is like, I do want to try to solve accessibility problems, but given that we have like a trigger for review of these, which is the e-filing integration, I would say let's defer changing existing interviews until we have that accessibility audit for a given form. At least we could revisit that in a couple of weeks, but I would say like for now, let's just do a little bit of research on a new best path forward for new forms, and like deprecate it in our documentation and tell people like, you shouldn't use a combo box.
Okay.
It's already not provided by the Weaver, so it's kind of hard for people to discover.
Unless you know DocAssemble things.
Unless you know DocAssemble, which I guess people can figure it out, but maybe we can add a note in all the places in our existing interviews where it's used and say, hey, this input's deprecated or something like that. That might be a relatively quick thing to do. Yeah,
that's definitely a doable thing. I have been meaning to make just a specific page in our documentation of like, oh, here are accessibility things to avoid, because we've gathered a few of these so far in DocAssemble, and I can do that and add this to it, and then just go through really quick and point all of the existing use cases to this issue and the documentation. So, okay.
So when someone is using this input, it's not 100% accessible, but they could type an answer, right? Which is
so that would,
the fallback use.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that it's worst case or best case, it's as accessible as just a text input for screen reader users. Worst case, it's not, because it doesn't actually, nothing about the screen read part of the element says that you can type things, because everything is about select an element, you're missing a selection. It uses the word select a lot in the ARIA, and I get, and a lot, even looking at the screen, it's one of those things of even if you aren't using a screen reader, it's sometimes hard to understand that you can even type in there, or specifically that you could type something that isn't in the drop down. And at least in this one case that Matt was using it in, you can't really type anything that's not in the drop down. You can't type a number you can't type something that's not a number and have it go through validation fine. And so this particular case is definitely just makes more sense for it to be just do the validation essentially. But yeah, that is sort of the worst case, is that people who had a screen reader can technically get by it, but absolutely nothing about the page is telling them what to do, or telling them what to do correctly. It's all saying bad information that you can't actually do. So
could we patch the ARIA at all? Is that something that sounds like a relatively small?
That's a thing we could do. Yeah, we could just, I think whatever, I don't know if it's reading this exact select one or if it's something else, but yeah, we could patch it to just say select or type everywhere. That would be a good change, honestly. And it would definitely be it's searching strings, and so it's doable. I'd have to do, and I think the work there would just be making sure that it is still like at least understandable and that like it works fine and doesn't do any weird keyboard shortcuts if you or not cheap. It doesn't do any weird keyboard commands or controls if you just go in there and you start typing things and then continue on. I know Enter did some weird things, but I can check.
There may be some things where like it might erase your input the first time you type it if you don't. Well, I know the combo box is really not the best in some cases, but maybe I'm thinking more of the Ajax input type, which uses the same interface.
That's fair. I don't know. I haven't.
Because if you get a match, then you have to click. Like sometimes when you think, okay, it's all done, it's selected, it's auto-completed the full thing, and you click away, it erases the answer, which is frustrating. I have that on one of the projects I'm working on right now. I mean, it really could be that it's just like a bad input style to use. It's hard to think about adding 3 buttons to replace it, but I don't see how you can do it without that, really.
Okay. I think this is definitely like there are some concrete things to do. I don't think the research will take super long, and so I can try and do that before the next backend call. Since it seems the best time to discuss it, and I do think that that's probably the best way to go about it. Is we'll look at it when we start e-filing forms. At least for now that even though we don't have like a quick and easy change, we'll look at it when we start e-filing forms, and then we'll make a decision on how to change that interview specifically and make sure that interview is tested. And so we're not changing tens of interviews without thoroughly testing all of the possible, like, just interview structure stuff that we're making there. So, okay.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we might introduce new bugs by trying to fix this accessibility issue.
As long as, if it's not a thing that we can make a one-line fix for every interview, it's new bugs possibilities are more of a possibility. Okay.
Well, good job catching this. It's good to know.
Yeah. Separately, I do need to find a good list of every single thing that DocAssemble does, because I feel like I've gone through interviews that we do things with, and then sometimes it's just, oh, here's an interview that did things in a weird specific way that had it like that made DocAssemble makes new HTML or something, and so I just have to make it. That's a separate thing, but I have to just do a full DocAssemble accessibility check, and not just here's the subset that we actively use a lot.
It's a great question, and it does make me another thing that kind of touches on to me is I'm going to add that as a separate item.
Okay.
Accessibility audit DocAssemble. Generally, how can we get a list of every kind of thing? And it's Wave. That's the test that we're using. Is that what it's called?
So I'm not using. So I'm not using Wave for this. The browser plugin's fine. It's a little confusing and sometimes hard for me to get exactly what the issue is, but it's still pretty good for just like single page things. But I'm using Axe, which is like AXE, which is like just there's a JavaScript package, and that's mostly I'm using that because it's the only JavaScript package that just sort of lets you, if you have a page, let's check it. And we need Kiln to be able to step through an entire interview really quickly. So it's not someone manually going to the screen, running it, going to the screen, running it.
Are there kind of like refactors that we're trying to introduce to DocAssemble over time that this would kind of fall in line with? So like one thing is when we're making pull requests, we're putting in typing, for example. Right. So are there other kinds of changes?
If it's something that like very clearly DocAssemble can make it, like DocAssemble can make a better accessibility choice, I do try and push those, and most of those have, like all of those, Jonathan's accepted all of those in fine. There were this one, which was like, this one just wasn't, I wasn't clear. Like I don't actually have a patch that I could submit to DocAssemble right now to fix it. And then there was another one that I ran into that was, if you have just one drop down on a page and you use no label in the fields, there is no actual label on the drop down itself, and it's kind of clear from page context if you go walk through the whole page that this is the only thing there. And so, but there's no specific, like if you use all of the like sort of keyboard controls to hop around the page and sort of look at different parts specifically, you can hop directly to the form and there will be no, it'll just say like drop down or a selection and it'll give you all the answers, but it's not super clear what exactly it's asking. And that was a thing that's also like you can get around it without DocAssemble. And I think I had made one change. I don't know if I made a PR, but it's essentially if there's something that with the information that DocAssemble has, it can do better with, I make that PR. If it's something that it's like the interview author needs to give more information, or it's not super clear that like DocAssemble gives you the option to have no label, like it would be a really wonky API to have like you can have no visible label, but you can still put an extra ARIA label and like all the YAML that you write out for the question. That seems really wonky, and so I haven't made that as a PR. Like if it's really short and it's clear that this can be done better, I'll make it. And if it's not, and it's sort of a weird open question, I sit on it for a bit and think. Like I essentially make issues like the combo box one, and I think there are a few other ones that are sitting around similarly.
Is there that? Well, that's an interesting idea though. Like, is there a reason we wouldn't want to just add an ARIA modifier to every field?
Because I think I did make that change, and I don't remember if I made the PR yet. But the only downside of that is that there's a field group which surrounds all of the possible fields on a page, and that one is labeled, but the field itself isn't labeled or doesn't have any label. And so it's kind of like if you had more than one, it would be unclear, or more than one field in the field group, it would be unclear what the first one is for, or like if it was the second one, what the second one is for specifically.
Okay. And
so worst case, like I think, like if adding that worst case, it just sort of is like, oh, the field group is referencing like what's the main question title on the page, and worst case, it just sort of is duplicate information because that it'll read it twice as you go through. Of like this is the exact same question, and it might not be super clear that it's reading a different thing, or if it's just some weird copy paste issue. But that's sort of what the state of things is now for this particular, or for that particular issue, which I think I just brought up as just a thing that like it wasn't like I came across it and it's not super like very clear. Oh, DocAssemble should be doing this thing. And so I haven't like made a very opinionated PR yet.
Okay.
I have a PR that kind of helps, but it's still not perfect. And so, yeah.
Right. And the reason is because sometimes there's more than one input. Is a field group applies to all of the fields listed on a page, or is it just like one row?
I think it's all of the fields on the page. There are actually two, and there's one that's like all the fields on the page, and then there's another one that is the buttons, like essentially just back and next are also wrapped in a field group. There's like form semantics that I'm not sure I quite understand how DocAssemble does them and or how they should be done, because I haven't seen other like things like DocAssemble, like multi-page forms done super, like a lot of the like accessible documentation out there is for what is essentially like a sign up form on one page where it's all of the fields are on one page and you click a post. Like I haven't seen this is how you should do multi-page forms, and this is how they should be structured. And so I sort of assume like Jonathan's done it fine because I know he does have an eye on these things and does his best. So but yeah, that's just sort of like more knowledge I have been slowly picking up over time and just sort of need to continue slowly picking it up over time.
Okay. Well, yeah, this is really interesting. So yeah, I guess we just have to keep trying to do as well as we can with accessibility. But yeah, I'm really glad that we're spending all this time looking at it. It's awesome. All right. Well, I guess let's go to the other. I might have been totally wrong about which one's going to be faster and which one's slower. But it's interesting, the dev and the test servers are both slow for loading interviews. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you noticed, Bryce? And is it every interview? Is it just after this change, but you don't think the change should be correlated? The one with
No, so I actually don't think it's related to that change at all. I think that was just a thing that the kiln test kept failing on that change, and I was like, this is very unrelated, but this is why it's happening from what I can tell. Or this is just what's happening. I have no idea why it's happening.
Okay.
But that was also something.
So something we could try is just restarting the server. If there were high load, I would just jump right to doing that because it might be like a stuck process, like either a background process and it could happen coincidentally on 2 servers. We used to have like, for a little while, we had like just bad performance on the dev server and people just were putting up with it, but then restarting it fixed it. So
yeah, that's fair. This is just sort of like the very, if you like do the
two.
Yeah, if you just do the drop down thing, this is the very first thing. So like normally that starts at like a lot closer to 0, since it's the first thing that's run about the interview.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, the one thing, I think I did a little bit, this morning I looked into how we might be able to do it, and I was able to. Is that going to open here? Yes, it is. I was able to locally spin up something that looks like this, where we is essentially like a little Python tool that you can attach to Python processes, and then it gives you a flame graph of like what took, or like when it was active and not idle, like what's taking super long. And so this particular section, I can't zoom in. This particular section was like when I was going through the same interview locally, and you can see like, oh, this is like it's calling index, which is just running the interview on docassemble, and then all the specific things you can see like where we in AL document and there's a playground run are calling as BDF and it takes up this much time, etc. And so essentially, I was gonna try and do this on the dev server, but the only downside is that Docker, like by default, restricts some profiling things that you can do to like attaching to existing processes, because there are some like weird security things that like holes that open if you have that capability just on by default. And so to do it, we'd have to stop the container and restart it. And so I think that was sort of, we could still do that if we wanted to, but I was trying to avoid the idea of having to stop the container and restart it, or like have any actual effect on the traffic. If it's dev, I don't think, like, it's not super big deal if we stopped and restarted with like the right settings to be able to do something like this. But I would at least be able to take a quick look and go through the same screens I did in this and see, oh, like clearly this docassemble function is taking a lot longer. We should figure out what's happening there and maybe patch it. I don't know if it's a thing that we can patch, or at least knowing a bit more of why it's going wrong instead of just maybe we need to restart. But it's one of those rabbit holes I don't have a good intuition on how long that might, or how far that might go. So
it does seem like it's worth us doing that change on the dev server. I don't know about the test server specifically, but the dev server seems safe to do. We can restarting it's not super disruptive to people right now.
Okay, that's cool.
I would say like we should let people know, hey, we're about to restart it. But it just means they won't be able to do anything for like 5 minutes or something.
Yeah.
In theory. The test server we could restart anytime, but it feels like that it's more helpful to be able to do the profiling on the dev server. I just tried opening up AL question test.yaml on my playground on the dev server and opened like right away. So I wonder.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this was just a weird thing that was only happening. That's the other part, is I haven't done a ton of like tried all of the other tons of options that I could, but like tried other interviews, the only thing I have tried is locally and then same interview on dev. And so I know it's something with the server state, but I haven't tried on that server state what might be causing it.
And it's not a front end thing. So I'm interesting, like that flame graph that you're looking at, I just was able to get something really similar using Firefox Profiler. It's just obviously going to capture stuff about loading and rendering the page on the front end. And I suppose also network resources.
Yeah. That one is more networky things, and this is essentially like the entire. This would be that whole bar that is like waiting for response for the server. This would be what that flame graph could expand into. But I think that's. What was I going to say there? Oh yeah, I don't think it's a front end thing, because if it was a front end thing, I don't think it would be starting at like 14 seconds, because
Right.
like at some point 14 seconds ago, the server knew about this request and had started a timer. And then for the next 14 seconds, it did something else that was not running the interview, and trying to look through Docassemble codes, a nightmare sometimes.
Can you reproduce that problem now? Do you mind seeing if it's happening for you now? Because that would be just check to see if it's different between our two computers.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like running exactly on. It was running through the test AL exhibit one.
Okay, so maybe it's
It
a
is-
specific interview.
Yeah, it's still taking a while for me. I'll wait for it to load and see. No, I can just move this one. Ta-da. Yeah, so this was. Is it doing the exact same thing? It's not doing the exact same thing. Okay, so that was a browser thing. But yes, defaults and docx. Next, it was like these next few screens take a while. What is a while? We'll see. I'll just keep doing it until I can get a like something that's very clearly it took. Yeah, like this one, it took 10 seconds, 9 seconds to actually start doing anything with the interview for the first part. So it's not as bad, but it's still 9 seconds on every screen is very, very ridiculous. So I don't know if that's enough for you to reproduce it. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's my user.
Well, I do have. I'm running that interview now too, and I wonder if it's trying to do like some of the rendering of the documents that takes a while.
Yeah. So there is. I know. So there is actually. It shows. That is something that happens later on in this section of preview label. Somewhere there's.
Yeah, if it tries to show the template.
I think it's the in progress template, which I don't know where that. Oh, here it is.
That does show all of the pages.
Yeah, so I think it might be when it's trying to render that. It's one of those things that I can't tell where exactly it. Preview label. Yeah, because I think it needs definition of the preview label, and then after it shows the preview label, it actually shows each item. So once it gets that, and then it takes like 2 seconds. So from here, like once it has the preview label and then finishing trying to show all the preview, it takes 2 seconds, which in my experience is about how long it takes the OpenOffice to make a thumbnail, which is not great. I feel like there is a quicker way to do that, but it's not like slow enough, and it's not annoyed enough yet. That like this is I think that's the issue. This feels like it's something else, given as it seems to be happening so much earlier in the interview.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean that is sort of one of the things. I think it sits undetected for so long because we know that some of the just document assembly, doc stuff, and thumbnail stuff takes a few seconds, and so I'm used to waiting for it, and I haven't actually tried to go and check it until the kiln test kept completely timing out multiple times, and I was like, something's wrong here.
Okay. Well, I actually am looking at the tests, and maybe Michelle, you might have some ideas too. It doesn't look like the most recent test failure is a timeout. I was seeing, it looked like there was a problem. Slightly different problem, if I can remember. So mine just failed. I just opened up a PR to remove that file that uses a combo box that's not used by anybody. And most of the tests worked, but the one that failed is the exhibit one. But it doesn't.
Is it failing differently than this? Because this is the same failing that I would been looking at. It's just taking taking too long to reach.
This
Yeah,
wouldn't
okay.
solve the problem that the server is having, but you can tell it to take longer. You can give it more time. You can
Yeah,
tell
that
it
is
so it
the
won't time out. It,
It's
it
not
won't solve the
definite.
problem, but it,
It's not just definitely that there's like an extra screen or something else we changed about how the exhibit class worked. We did change the exhibit class, not
well,
like
we
Yeah.
just
can
now though, but
we can see the screenshot, but I don't believe this is the kind of problem you'd have. This is the kind of error you get. I think you would get an error that said you're missing a variable for this page. But
Mhm.
so if you
Yeah.
go to the summary, you can get the
Sorry, yeah, I
screenshot.
think we can do that one.
let's see.
That was okay. Yeah, I was gonna say
Okay,
that actually
artifacts.
I was attempting to go through why it was doing that, and that was why that was like I was essentially just trying to go through that exact kiln test to make sure it wasn't an issue. I did get a bit
Okay.
distracted once I realized that the server was just very slow, but I went through at least most of the steps. But the thing I wasn't super clear. Oh, it's actually this one, or at least sometimes it's this.
Yeah,
okay.
that I've gotten before. I think I tried to.
It's not like always deterministic.
Yeah,
Why that
this is
happens.
another thing I've seen before, and
It's like a race
it's
condition.
a thing that it might be a race condition. It's a thing that I know has shown up on production too, because I get the emails for those, but I haven't I have no idea where to even start because from what I've looked into, it's just it calls out to I don't remember which process it is, but it calls out to something else that's not in Python, and it passes in two different field names, and then when it checks again the same field name, it's just not there. And so I don't quite know how to start debugging it because all of that happens outside of Python, and it's a new process and everything like that.
So in this circumstance, like it only sometimes happens. It makes me think, and it's always the same file. It makes me think it's a race condition. But I have seen it before where you get similar errors and there's some glitch in the file, one of the files, where just calling PDF concatenate fails. But
Okay,
it works and renders fine on its own. It just doesn't like being concatenated.
that's fair. I don't think it's that because I was able to go through, at least on the dev server, after like 5 minutes, I was able to go through and get to the final screen where it just shows you all the previews. But
So it's
So
maybe more of a race condition then.
feels more like a race condition. But
Yeah.
what exactly race? It's that I can't even sort of quite tell you what is the race condition that's happening, other than it's looking for a file, but it's not there. Like when is that file being deleted? Why is it being deleted? Like all these other things that like what is it racing between? That I don't know.
Is that something? I don't know. Do we feel like we've done enough investigation to like bring this on Jonathan's radar?
For this, I can look into it again. I think I'd be able to find those, at least the parts of code, and to be able to tell them, hey, this is happening, and it from what I can tell, it happens right here. But that's the most I would be able to tell. I don't think I'd have enough details about like the state of the server when it happens or like anything like that. But it might just be worth pointing out, and he might have a good immediate idea to what it might be. So
Yeah, at least it
that's
might
a
help
good
us save some troubleshooting time. That's good. Do we? I always feel like when we're troubleshooting something, it helps to be on the latest release. Do we want to try to upgrade that server to Python 3.10 and 1.4.1, or do we want to hold off on that for either the dev or the test server? Because that requires a container upgrade.
Yeah. To me, this feels like what dev is for, and so I'd be perfectly fine. We fixed the one like glaring issue that breaks all assembly line things, and that I've been able to run with assembly line, and I think toolkit installed as well. And even that was just we were using backports, and backports doesn't exist whenever you get to the most recent version. There's nothing else in the Python documentation that I've really seen suggests that anything about 3.10 is breaking. And if it is breaking, it's just a matter of other packages being strict about what they run on, and not having upgraded to 10 yet, which if docassemble is upgraded to 10, most of our packages, I think, or most of our dependent packages will have also upgraded.
Okay. And we use a lot of packages in the assembly line, so I feel like we probably would have hit a pretty good spread of packages that might not be compatible.
Yeah.
Okay, so we should upgrade dev to 1.4, including the system upgrade. Which gets
These
us
tests
to
are running on
510.
these tests are running on the test server, not the dev server.
Yep. So do we also think we should upgrade test? The goal of test is to be like production, of course.
Yeah, that's what I'm
but-
sure about.
Well, the question was, in order to get rid of this
So
problem,
to clarify, I don't think that.
try and run it.
So to clarify, I don't think we're saying upgrading will get rid of the problem, but we are saying if we want to report to Jonathan, we should have upgraded and are reporting, like if we should be able to try and reproduce this on the latest version.
Okay. So that I think is at least not, it won't do it with AL Kiln. You might be able to do it by hand, but it won't do it with AL Kiln.
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
fine. Yeah, I don't think that's a thing we expect Helm to do, but it is just a thing that we should do. And if for some reason it does magically fix, then I guess we can update test too. But yeah, I feel like if to check, I think we would want to update dev and then sort of sit and just let dev accumulate whatever cruft it does over the few weeks and then see if it slows down, since we're doing a restart anyway.
Okay, so our action items then are to upgrade the dev server, hold off on test server for like a week or two, at least, and try to get a good report. And because it is complicated enough, it sounds like our goal would be to get a good report to Jonathan.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yep.
Yeah, and presumably it is intermittent. I like you, I have seen it before where it doesn't seem like anything changes, but it does seem like it's consistent if I hit the back button and try it again some of the time at least.
Okay.
But maybe it's not the case here. Like in this case, all of the tests use the same files, so it was really weird.
Yeah. Okay. That is at least actionable items. I'll try and do these things. See what we can
All right. Well, I don't know about when to upgrade the dev server, but I'm guessing
get. Probably at night. I think that the active users are like us, Yvette, Hayden, and
Maybe Caroline.
maybe Caroline. Is Caroline using ours still?
I don't
I
think
don't
Caroline's
think
using
she
ours.
often does,
I believe she's
even
using
before.
Alaska servers now.
Okay. Yeah. So in that case, I could like sort of just wait till after post working hours, and I'll make a post about it now, or like maybe just a few, like 15 or so minutes before I do it.
I think, yeah. Now would help so people can plan ahead.
That's fair.
Yeah. Although, so to be clear, like the downtime is, so one thing,
10
Bryce,
minutes.
is maybe don't delete, if you follow the literal Docker upgrade suggestions, they say to delete the old container because everything's on S3. But I think we might not want to do that this time.
Yeah, I can avoid that.
But other than that, like it can take 10 minutes to start back up. So yeah, people should plan ahead, but I don't think anyone's going to have a deadline tonight where they need to have it. So
Okay.
I wouldn't feel like you have to lock yourself in. Like a notice saying, hey, I'm planning to update it. I'll ping again when I actually am ready to click the button. That way you have some flexibility about exactly when you do it. I feel like that's fair.
That's fair. Yeah, I will. At the very least, I won't do it before like 5:30. So
Okay. All right. Great. Well, yeah, it sounds like what we really, the slowdown, we don't really know a lot about, except maybe Docker stop will clear it up because it sometimes does.
Yeah.
But the bigger issue is this PDF TK failure, right? So kind of changed. Probably should write that down. And it's in the AL document test, or is the AL exhibit test?
AL exhibit test. Test AL exhibit.
Test AL exhibit. Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got like 15 minutes left here.
Yeah, I will
So
stop bringing things.
oh yeah. So Bryce, you said you might have more big picture stuff. Michelle, anything that came up to your mind, like as we were discussing this? 15 minutes isn't.
Nope.
The only thing I thought of for right now, at least, is the Weaver redesign. I don't think we really can go through that in a systematic way now. But what were the other things you were thinking of, Bryce, that you thought might be good to add to the discussion?
Less of things I was like, that's less specific things I was thinking of, and more of just how to do things would be, or like what to look at first would be sort of doing like at least maintenance of older interviews / adding things we know are good that we just have not or we know are good in interview UI, like UX, that we just have not done yet. Stuff like navigation and figuring out a consistent, easy way to do navigation. Sorry, not navigation, progress. Like a consistent, easy way to do good progress. Review screens, and like polishing up all of what we would consider the process for review, like adding a review screen and making it like rigorous. And those are like the two big ones off the top of my head, but those are the ones that I know we've gotten like feedback on of like, yeah, that's really important. They're important in accessibility. They're important in just that, like in our audits we've done before, like they've shown up, and it's just, but they're just like sort of harder technical problems. And so I think if we had at least nailing down the exact process that we want for those. I don't know why I said navigation, because I don't actually know what navigation would mean in this context. But yeah.
I think navigation is good, but well, that's how at least I would call like the left hand status. I guess it's not really interactive, but that's what I meant.
When I said that, I really meant like progress, navigation as progress / progress bars, whichever we think is the better UX.
And I do think that the visual map, the roadmap kind of approach is the way to go. Like where you say, these are the sections we're going to run into, and then you highlight which section somebody is in.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's the best approach. And we do have, I think we've thought through enough to like say, hey, these are the sections for every interview. That maybe you tweak them a little bit, but we could add them to every interview and it would be meaningful in every interview. So there's an open issue for that. There is a question like, what should we be thinking about when it comes to old interviews?
Yeah, that is sort of the other much bigger question that I want to try to imply of like how do we do anything with them? Because at the current rate, there's max 4 of us working at a time, and we're slowly building up lots of older interviews. And yeah, like, so just how do we want to try and process that? I don't know if it's worth trying to think of ways that we can introduce new students to existing interviews in a way that's still like useful for them to learn, but sort of learning the ropes and everything. But yeah, I don't know.
I wonder if it's the kind of thing where, I mean, it feels like it's kind of a bit unfair to give that as a learning product to somebody, because it's hard and it requires having done it for a semester, right? Like somebody like in Hayden's position, maybe we could train to do that. Someone who's just coming on new, who's never done an interview from scratch, wouldn't necessarily have the context to edit an old interview. That can be really challenging.
You know, I mean, as far as editing goes, but adding review screens might be a little bit easier in some of the simpler interviews. Because
Okay.
there are times where we've started people like in the middle, right? I mean, we've done that with stuff like with the Weaver, where we have, here is an interview, now edit it, right?
That's true.
with some guidance. And so we might be able to start them in the middle with your learning review screens and how to find those variables and what to do on that screen.
Just wondering if it could be like a paid task. Maybe that would help.
That might help.
But it depends on finding the person who wants to be paid to do that, which
Mm.
may not be easy.
Yeah.
But that's a good point, though. Michelle, you're right. Maybe there's a part of it that's easy enough that someone could do it because it's not really editing the whole interview. It's just doing a discrete thing.
Yeah.
Well, review screen. So I did make the review screen generator a lot better.
Right.
I could probably still use more people looking at it and thinking about ways to refine it more. But that could be, I do like that as like a goal for like a sprint that we would have or something, potentially. But I do not know which of our older interviews we should prioritize, which ones have heavy use and how we can make them more heavily used such that they'd have a big payoff.
I mean, do we have analytics as to, where people get in there, like how far people get? If we analyze and find that there's a lot of drop off at this point or that point.
Yeah, I mean, for something as generalized as navigation and
sure.
Yeah, it's harder to know, like, this is the thing that caused someone to drop off. But I was thinking more like, well, which are our most important interviews?
Which we also have.
We have analytics for that.
Yeah, we do have analytics for that.
Yeah, I just don't know what the answer is. I'm not saying we can't get it. But
yeah, that's fine. Off the top of our heads, we don't know. Off the top of our heads, we do know for appeals, because I had to gather all that recently of just like how many people got to the end of those forms, but that's only in the very small subset of appeals, and those are definitely like, I'm looking through the other ones, the appeals is much smaller traffic than like stuff like the affidavit of indigency and stuff like that. So,
which does have
I think
navigation and a review screen.
Yeah. I was gonna say, off the top of my head, I think that one's our most used.
Okay.
Now that we don't have the COVID ones, the CDC one.
Yeah, and I think the TRO still gets really widely used. Like, it's like the ones that are linked on mass.gov, and I think those are the only two. Okay. What else do we know about that? I mean, the other thing I think to consider is editing old interviews versus launching new ones. So there's a lot of importance in maintaining stuff, but we also get a lot of institutional benefit from launching new things. So, because people can see the work that you've done. So it can be helpful in a lot of ways to getting more people interested and excited and involved. Also, maybe it's hard to get people to pay attention to an old thing that you've done. So if it's already not getting a lot of traffic, getting new traffic to something that people aren't really using yet might be really hard to do versus building something around a new thing.
If we can figure out some way to make changes more visible, I don't know, like take shots through it and really improve something so that it is a visible improvement, that might also get people excited. I don't know.
Well, we don't have a lot of ways to tell people about our work, so it's more what I'm thinking of.
Okay.
All right, I'm looking at the petition to change name of adult, and so that's one where there was some interest in it for this name change project. It does not have navigation, but it does have a review screen. Oh, I know another thing we should add to our list of things to add as refactors. What would be like the new feedback, which we don't know for sure that that's an important thing, but
the new feedback.
We suspect it is. The one that you worked on, the new feedback feature,
Oh, just publishing that, you mean?
is it automatically going to be available to people? No, we have to add it to the download screen, right? We want to get people's feedback.
Yes,
at
yeah.
points.
Yeah, sorry, that was kind of what I meant by publish, but it is down to like a one line that you can add.
Okay.
But yeah, okay.
Just like every factor for interviews. Well, okay, so I think it's a good task. I mean, I do think something maybe we should talk about at our next management meeting is how do we get some new stuff in the pipeline, stuff that people worked on that might be ready to do. We haven't launched any new forms in this calendar year, I think, have we? It's not really where our project has been, but there probably are some things where we can do, like by putting in, 15, 20 hours of work, we can get a small thing launched.
Yeah.
That we should just try to do. So I just want to balance that with like revising old stuff.
That's fair. Maybe I was just for at least the like announcement thing. Maybe it's a combination of like we launch like one or two new things, but also at the same time we go through and like give facelifts and like add these other like cool features to the other ones, so we can sort of do both at the same time. If you like, hey, not only have we've added this, like we've added a new interview, and also we've added like in this new interview we added this like cool new thing, and it's been added to all of our other ones and sort of stuff. If that was something we wanted to try to do. So.
That's a good idea. Yeah, and there's things that I'm working on too, like the Up to Code project where they could be divided. So like I'm doing like a 93A demand letter right now, and that's specific to Up to Code. It's integrated really heavily with Up to Code, but I could always fork that and launch it as a standalone project. So
that's right. Okay.
That's something I can do personally. Unbundling stuff. I like that idea though. So let's see. I don't really know what things we should start to look at to decide like what are new forms, but maybe we should just do a little audit of our list of repositories and see which of those are also live forms on the site and have that be a starting point. There's probably a pretty big gap.
I see.
And I had students last semester work on projects. I don't think any of them did an assembly line form though, from my memory. But they also did not put their work on GitHub. But we should maybe pre-think about that for student work this semester. Plan for that could be like something we try to design into our process from the beginning. In our classes, in the Lit Fellows, and in the in my class and in Coding the Law.
That's right.
Okay. Okay. I feel like we've kind of like reached the end of our energy. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to add, or any other thoughts about this, or other things to like highlight for next week?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, so good. We dove in well on some big stuff. Good meeting, and we'll see.